Russ, your article, The UnGoverning America, is fascinating because it provides a logical structure to understanding what US President Donald Trump is actually doing, because very often it seems chaotic and difficult to understand. Can you kind of give us a 35,000-foot view, or the overview of the argument?
Up until Donald Trump's presidency, every American president, when they took office, sought to govern. They had goals, long-term goals that they wanted to reach, and they wanted to use the resources that the state could marshal and to apply them in ways that would reach those goals over time. That's just, very elemental idea what governing is all about. It's policy. We had a policy state. With the Trump presidency, there's an undoing of the policy state. He doesn't want to govern. He actually wants to ungovern. He wants to dismantle both the institutions and the norms that allow the state to pursue settled policies over time. And that means two attacks in particular. He wants to attack experts. He wants to deauthorize experts, fire experts, exile them from the government. One of the just most obvious examples is firing the PhD in economics who ran the Bureau of Labor Statistics after he didn't like the jobs report. And from that to the Center for Disease Control to the Department of Defense, the goal is to sideline the experts. Why? Because expertise has a kind of authority. It's an authority founded in knowledge, and he can't bear that others in his administration have authority besides himself. The second thing that UnGoverning focuses on is process. Any kind of government has set any bureaucracy, any company has settled operating procedures. And I'm a teacher. When I want to offer a new course, there's a settled process for proposing a course, having it get approved, putting it in the course catalog. It's not just up to sort of one person's will. My dean waking up and say, do I like this? Do I not like this? Let's see how I feel today. There's a process, and there's a process for everything. That's how you make rational decisions in an organization. So the other part of UnGoverning is to undo every settled process, every standard operating procedure. Once you get rid of expertise, once you get rid of process, you've gotten rid of the apparatus of governing. And that's actually a settled goal. That is the logic of the Trump administration. It's not just total chaos. There is a design and a purpose.
Your article refers to Project 2025 of the Heritage Foundation, which I've read it, and it seems like a blueprint, the playbook for the process of ungoverning. Would you agree?
Yeah, the amazing thing there is that during the campaign, Trump disavowed Project 2025. He explicitly said, that's not what I'm about. I don't know anything about that. I don't know who's doing that. He distanced himself from it. Why? He didn't campaign on it. He didn't say, this is what I want to do when I get elected. My co-author, Nancy Rosenblum, and I, at the time he was disavowing it, published a short piece saying, don't believe him. This is exactly what he's going to do. If you actually look and you study the trajectories of the first Trump administration, it all pointed in the direction. It was codified and rationalized, you could say, laid down in type in Project 2025. And we said, yeah, that is the purpose. That will be the purpose of the next Trump administration. And I have to say, we get a lot of things wrong, but we got that one right.
Just last weekend, there were, I guess, a little over a week ago now, there were no Kings rallies all over the United States. And one of the defining features of ungoverning seems to be the concentration of power in the executive, in the Trump administration. And could you comment on that, please?
It's so interesting that's the slogan that the demonstrations have taken, because it does point us back to really the 18th century and in British history, the 17th century, when there was a monarchic power that at its core ruled according to the will of the monarch. When John Locke wrote the Second Treatise on Government in 1680, he said, freedom under government is to be free from the uncertain, unknown, inconstant, arbitrary will of another man. And so the idea was to have a government of laws rather than a government of men, a government of one man, in particular, one man's will. So that encapsulates the whole struggle against monarchy, which we thought was long done, certainly in the United States. We thought we'd sort of settled that one in the 18th century. But the reason that a president and an administration like Trump's would ungovern, would sideline experts, and would dismantle settled operating procedures is in order to concentrate power in the president's personal will. And that is to say that they want to create a kind of power that the Constitution, that any Constitution, whether it's the Canadian Constitution, the American Constitution, any Constitution, is actually meant to push to the side, and actually to forbid, which is a personal power. To have constitutional government is to have a form of rule where there is no personal power, where no one's will rules. And so, yes, I think this is an effort to recreate the power of personal will. And and you can see this in Trump's tariff policies. If you follow his tariff policies on China, if you actually follow, like, what is the rate, you'll see it bouncing all over the place. It's not like he said 100% and we stayed at 100%. It bounces around depending on his mood. And that's what he wants. He doesn't want anyone to know what the settled policy is. He wants to say, hey, let's see what I feel like when I wake up tomorrow.
I think Canada's grappling with this at this moment because, as you probably know, the Ontario government released a video ad on Thursday that was essentially 1 minute of former President Ronald Reagan talking about tariffs and how bad tariffs are. And that evening, President Trump saw it on TV during the World Series and immediately canceled trade talks with Canada. And then now here in Canada, conservatives have backed Trump, saying it was the wrong thing, it was time. But it really almost doesn't matter, does it? I mean, plays right into his MO. Here's an opportunity for more chaos. I have a justification, and I'm going to cancel the trade talks. Would you agree or disagree?
Well, he wants to keep, all foreign powers, in a state of hypersensitivity to his will, to his mood, and have them be courting his personal approval on a daily basis. So so one province in Canada happened to air, so put something online that offended him. And he wants to show that if you offend me, even in a trivial way, even if it's not the central government of Canada doing this, but one province, I am going to retaliate. I'm the one in charge. It's my will that counts.
What about the idea of placing loyalty above competence within agencies? I mean, this has been a really defining feature of his cabinet and of the heads of agencies. Why is he doing that?
Let's talk about loyalty. Everybody in politics needs loyalty. If you run for office, running for office is a very lonely thing to do. When you're a leader, all leadership is lonely. And you can't lead all by yourself. So you need a team around you, whether you're a governor, a prime minister, a president, or anything. If you're the head of a small division, and you need people around you who are going to help you succeed. And in that respect, you need loyalty. But what genuine leaders who are committed to governing, whether in the private sector or the public sector, what they want is a loyalty to their purposes, to their projects, to their principles. They're not asking for a truly excellent leader, doesn't ask for personal submission to their individual will. What they say is, look, Ronald Reagan said was, look, I have a few basic principles, small government, lower taxes, and I want to hire people in my administration who are loyal to this project and loyal to reviving conservatism. And he didn't want them to bow down and kiss his shoes. He wanted them to serve his goals, which weren't just his goals. He thought they should be the goals of the whole country. That's fine. That kind of loyalty anyone needs. What Trump is looking for is not merely loyalty, but submission. And that's something different.
I guess that leads me to his energy dominance doctrine. We do mostly energy news here at Energi Media. And this energy dominance, where the fact that the U.S. is the world's #1 producer of oil, #1 producer of LNG, and then he uses that dominance to go out and bully countries into trade agreements and other kinds of agreements. Is that the kind of an outgrowth of his approach?
I think so. I mean, I think he walks into any room and he asks himself, who's got the power here? and he wants it. He doesn't want to have some of the power. He wants to have all the power in any room, in any situation. And in his view, if you don't have all the power, then you are weak and you're subject to somebody else, to somebody else's will. So everything is always a contest of power after power, culminating only in death, as Hobbes said. There's another way of thinking just about human relationships, whether they're individual relationships or relationships between countries. And that's the idea that we can all get better off simultaneously, that we can, agree, that we can arrive at kind of mutually beneficial agreements, that it's not, hey, am I going to win or are you going to win? Who's got the power in this interview, me or you? That we could both, learn something simultaneously is a possibility. That's been the traditional form of American leadership. And that's why I think for most of the 20th century, after World War II, and the early decades of the 21st century, when people often on the left would say, hey, America's an empire, America's imposing its way on the world, what a lot of Americans would say is, that's actually not what we're about. We may do that on occasion, and we don't always act at our best. But what our, the source of our real leadership is that we think we're in it together. We're in it together with Canada, the best ally that any country has ever had in the history of politics. We're in it together with Europe. We're in it together with Japan. We're in it together with human beings all over the world. And that's the real source of our leadership. And it's that idea of that we're all in it together and that we could all benefit together, and that American power isn't just about imposing our way on others to their disadvantage, but creating webs of cooperation that lift up the whole world. That idea is what is being trashed and destroyed right now.
Is it fair to say then that Trump is, as I've seen argued in a couple of articles, that he's reworking the world order so that he destroys that web of relationships, and the world then is divided into a few camps, maybe with China and Russia and other parts of Asia versus Fortress North America versus Europe, that kind of thing. Is that what he's doing in order to concentrate his power in the U.S.?
I think that is actually what he's doing. I think he thinks it's going to benefit the United States, that it's going to make Americans, richer and make America great again. Look at Canada right now. I mean, we're pushing Canada into negotiating with China. And Canada is looking out at the world and saying, we're going to just have to manage our own affairs. We're not going to be able to rely on this great ally to both, to steward our prosperity and to help, protect this continent. And so I think they're going to be looking, much more strategically at India, at China, at Russia, at Europe, and ask in every case, what's in it for us? How do we advance ourselves? And think like they're alone in the world. And once every country in Europe and every country in Asia and every country in South and North America, think that way, I hate to say it, but it's going to make all of us poorer. It's going to make all of us weaker. But I think that our allies are going to probably have no choice but to think increasingly in that way.
Well, I want to end our interview then with a question, Russ, about Canada's strategy, because Donald Trump took over in January, and we have a new prime minister as of March in Mark Carney, former economist and head of two central banks. What he has said is this ends the further integration of Canada and America, well, at least our economies. That's done. We're now going to look towards Asia and Europe. And he's busy running around doing free trade agreements in Asia. I just came back from the ASEAN summit. He's done some in Europe, and he doesn't kowtow to Trump. He kind of stands up to him without being belligerent about it. From your point of view, is that the correct strategy to respond to Trump?
So I don't want to say it's the correct strategy, but I think it's the correct posture. I mean, strategy is just there people think about this all day long and all night long. It's the last thing they think before they go to bed, the first thing they think in the morning. And I'm not eating, breathing, and sleeping what the best strategy is day to day for an entire and great country like Canada. But I think it's the right posture. I think the basic posture is to say that we can't assume that say the manufacturing economy of Ontario and the manufacturing economy of the American Midwest are going to be knit together, almost like the manufacturing economy of Michigan and Illinois or something. which they have been for the past, century and a half. And we're going to have to think about, how we relate to every other, manufacturing economy in the world, as an independent entity. So I think that is a very prudent posture, and one that, will serve the national interest of Canada.
Russ,
Exactly what agreement to get into and what agreement to reject, and how to balance different competing forces. Those are things I can't say, speak to.
Russ, fascinating insights. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you.